The robots, they might be coming. They might already be here. I just had a very peculiar conversation with somebody at an insurance company that had me really curious about whether or not insurance companies are hiring AI agents to handle, negotiate, and try to resolve these claims. And we'll talk about it on this week's Monday Morning Lawyer. Good morning, friends. It's Jobeth Bowers, your accident and injury guy, coming at you from my Elkton office. And last week, I had a very peculiar conversation with what was supposed to be, and maybe it was, a live insurance adjuster, but it was just very, very peculiar. So I have an auto accident claim that I am working with that involves multiple herniated discs, a concussion diagnosis, bunch of other injuries. Typically, these are the types of things that when we see them, they say, hey, this is probably a six-figure claim. And then it comes down to, is there ample insurance limits? Is there enough coverage to actually pay that claim? Which is the topic of so many of these podcast episodes about you having the proper insurance. That way, if the driver who hits you doesn't. So please go back, revisit some of those, because this story may have you wanting to recheck those limits. But the purpose of this is not necessarily the value of this case. It was how this weird phone call went. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than most of my podcast episodes because it's more of a story time thing and a concern somewhat for the future in the handling of these accident claims. So this case happens. I've received an offer to resolve this case for somewhere around $20,000 from the insurance company. Nobody called me. They just faxed over or mailed over a letter. I don't recall which one it was, but they just sent a letter. And one thing that I've learned in years of handling these claims with insurance companies is if they're trying to settle this case, they're going to pick up the phone. They're going to try to have a conversation with a real human. If they know that the offer that they're making is absolute hot garbage, they're going to send a fax. They're going to send it at like 2 a.m. on Sunday night when nobody's there to pick up the phone and call them and give them a raft of you-know-what for making such an atrocious offer. This is a claim in which the insurance company's driver has a $100,000 policy limit. It's something that we've been talking about on a lot of recent episodes. It's a very common amount of coverage to have. Not everybody has it, but usually I see people either with, the bulk. If I were going to map these all out, there's a big chunk of people who have minimum limits coverage, couple sparse that have 5,100, which is kind of like a, hey, my insurance agent didn't completely screw me over, but he or she tried. 100, 300 is kind of the average entry level I'm taking life seriously policy. So if you don't have at least that, protect yourself. Talk to me about it. Free, absolutely free all the time. Soon, my guess is sometime end of the summer, I now have the book, the new edition of the insurance buying book that is with a handful of folks, including some insurance professionals for editing purposes. Not necessarily the grammar, spelling, but more of the, hey, read this. Tell me what feedback you have. I have some regular people, so to speak, some folks like you taking a look at this to say, hey, does this all make sense? Is there anything about this that has you shaking your head? Because the purpose behind the book is to make it all make sense. And so that normal people like you can understand this so that you're armed with what it takes to buy a quality insurance policy. There's even a chapter that I'm putting into this book that includes ways for which you can ask questions of a potential insurance agent or broker and find out that they don't know what they're talking about or that they do and you should work with them. So if you are interested in being an early preview, let's call it editor, sort of, you want to take a crack at this, read through. The information's not going to change. Some of the way that I phrase it might based on the feedback that I'm getting, but I'd love to have more people take a look at this because, sure, you're helping me edit this book, but at the same time, you're learning about your insurance policy, which I personally think is super important. And you should probably want to do that. So feel free to drop me a line. I'll throw my email address right back up there up top. Send me an email there and say, hey, send me a copy of the book. And I will send it to you because when I launch this book, when we republish the new edition, even though it's going to be for sale wherever you could buy books, Amazon and the like, nobody ever has to pay for this book. You will always, even when it's in published form, be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, I want a copy of that book. You could probably come into my office and I'll hand it to you. It's not here yet because we're still in that editing process, but I want to get back to talking about that conversation, this peculiar conversation that was so peculiar that I'm still not sure if I was talking to a real person or an AI agent. And it doesn't surprise me if the answer to that question is that the insurance company in question hired or is employing the use of AI agents to, quote, negotiate these claims. So I have this phone call, $20,000 offer approximately. These are not actual numbers. They're close to the numbers because I'm not going to give a lot of private information, although we're going to be filing a lawsuit on this case very, very soon, and it's going to become very, very public very soon. So we're not disclosing anything confidential here in telling this story, but $100,000 limit of the policy, $20,000, significant injuries, multiple disc herniations, concussion symptoms, and actually, no, not symptoms, a diagnosis. There's an actual a concussion diagnosis, black and white in the paperwork. And I go and I start the conversation with, hey, I'm scratching my head on why this offer is where it is. It really should be, and I understand you don't give everything in the initial offer. Check. Makes sense. I understand. And I also understand the tactics behind that. In fact, last week's episode talked about a lot of those tactics and that they employ to get you to take less than what your claim is worth a lot of the time. So I'm talking about the herniations. I'm talking about the concussion. And the response that I get from whoever or whatever is on the other side of the phone with me is if they didn't listen to a word I said. And they rolled through, well, we did this and we reduced that bill. And I said, pardon me, the real bulk of the value in this claim is not the medical bills. And these insurance companies love to say, oh, this doctor charged too much and that bill is too high and they treated too long and blah, 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 blah. These are all tactics that insurance companies use to try to get people to take less so they can make more. Again, very relevant to last week, June 22nd's episode on the podcast. So I'm going to flash this early. Normally there's kind of a format that I do here, but if you can't find it on YouTube, go to bowerslawmd.com, right up there at the top where it says podcast. And if you're doing that, as this one comes out live, it's the last episode right before this one. So, Prado's on about this stuff. And I'm like, what this individual has gone through is what this claim is about. Because ultimately, the answer to the question of what is my injury claim worth is always, what would the award be if we took this to a jury, or in the smaller cases to a judge? What would the result be? That's what the case is worth, because it's only worth as much as an insurance company is willing to offer for it or a jury is going to rule. So do you have factors that indicate this pain and suffering of what this person went through? Can you relate that to a jury of peers? Our office tends to say, yes, we absolutely can. We've done so numerous times and will continue to do so. I am asked then the question, though, in this conversation of, can you please tell me why you believe this case is worth the $100,000 limit of the policy? And I stopped. I'm like, were you not on this call from the beginning like I was, where I described what is clearly in the medical records that have been sent to you, the 3 herniated discs, the concussion, the description of everything that my client had to go through and still to some extent goes through in dealing with the aftermath of this accident. Fast forward into this very frustrating conversation. And if you've ever talked to AI, you'll realize how circular it can be sometimes. This individual never made a counteroffer, never made any attempt to say, we'll get more for you, whatever. It was just, let me re-review this and we'll get back to you. They didn't extend another offer, which, don't get me wrong, the next offer they're going to extend is going to be like 22 grand and then 23 grand. It's just going to be a waste of everybody's time. So, ruin the story. You'll see this one. You're not going to look for it, but if you were, you would see this one popping into the courts relatively soon, and we'll go through the process. And ultimately, like with many of these cases, we will get to a certain point in the timeline in which the insurance company throws their hands up in the air and says, okay, we owe it. Here's the $100K. But you have to deal with it. You as the client have to wait. And you have to trust. You have to trust our office that we know what we're doing. Our track record will prove that, but you weren't there for that. You can only see the reviews that we have on Google. You can only see the results that we post on our website. You can ask around other attorneys, although most of the other attorneys in the area don't do what we do, don't see us in the courtroom. They're not on the other side of these things. So it's not like a divorce attorney where two people hire their own independent local attorneys who show up and tee off in court. We're dealing with attorneys that are hired by insurance companies, and most of them are in other parts of the states, Baltimore, DC area. They're not here. Their office isn't on this street, but it baffles me that the insurance companies, and it just really rewinds to what we talked about last week, is it's another way to delay. By not having a substantial conversation about resolving this case, it will sit probably at least for another week, because in good faith, I'm going to at least assume, even though all of the evidence tells me otherwise, that this was a real person who's really going to reevaluate this case and come back with a real offer. So I'm not going to guns blazing file suit on this case today or tomorrow. But they just bought themselves another week or two, because when they get back to me and they're like, yeah, we can go 25 or we can go 28 or maybe we can go 30. None of these numbers are 100. None of these numbers are anywhere near 100. None of these numbers are going to get it done. So they bought themselves a couple of weeks. Inevitably, we're going to file suit. That process is not fast. If we're filing suit for a case in the circuit court, anything valued 30K or above, which is a lot of these cases, it's a 12 to 18 month track till we get to a point where we're likely to get it resolved, depending on who the insurance company is. I've talked about scenarios in which sometimes we just have to file suit and they scramble. But a lot of the bigger ones, the ones that have in-house counsel. In-house counsel is a term for the insurance company owns a law firm, one of those sitting in Towson or Baltimore or the DC metro area. They make a wage, they make a salary. If I file 10 cases or 10,000 cases against insured drivers of their company, their cost to defend is virtually the same. So they don't scramble. They have no reason to scramble. But the ones that actually have to cut a check because they're not big enough, they scramble sometimes. But knowing who that is super important. So I'm a little concerned. I'm a little perturbed. And at the same time, I'm interested in how, if they are at this phase in the process using AI to try to be an intermediary on these claims. I'm not even going to say that they're negotiating the claims, because I don't think that, there's a degree of licensing and certification that they need to be able to do this that the AI is not going to. I'm interested to see how we can take advantage of it, honestly. And can we crack the code on how to jump the ship and maybe get more than what these cases are actually worth in an ethical way? We're not going to cut any corners or do anything dodgy or break the law in any way. But if there's a way to take advantage of a utility that the insurance company's using to disadvantage and to save money, then I want to exploit that if I can. So we'll be looking into that. I'll be exploring this. I'm going to ask some very specific questions the next time I'm on the phone with this adjuster to try to suss out whether or not they might actually just be an AI chat agent or if it's a real person. Because at this point, based on the recent conversation, I'm scratching my head a little bit and I suspect that there might be something else going on here. So we went long on that one, but this is kind of a lot to talk about and not really pointed with specific advice, just a concern, an observation, a curiosity that I have that I wanted to share with all of you. So again, all the past episodes on the website. Go to bowerslawmd.com. Right up there on that top bar where it says podcast, you can find all of the old episodes. Tons and tons and tons of great information. Also, just throughout the website, there's just a ton of information. Feel free to digest that. We're still always doing those free insurance policy reviews. We've taken a few of them over the past couple of weeks that had really, really deficient coverage, and they were super helpful, super thankful in how helpful we were in them receiving better insurance. So I'm always excited about that because I want people to be protected. I don't like being the bearer of bad news in a situation with a catastrophic injury to say, hey, there's only so much insurance. The probability and the prospect of us resolving this at trial for a larger verdict and actually getting paid on it seems slim to none. The best way to protect yourself is to have better coverage. So take a look at that. Have me take a look at that. Have a real conversation with your agent. Again, the offer is open. If you want to review the current draft of the book that should be released later this summer, end of summer, beginning of the fall, shoot me an email. Say, hey, send me a copy of the book. I will fire that bad boy right across wherever it is, because you may not even get the version that you're seeing here today if you wait a couple of days, because I'm always taking that feedback. I'm still writing a little bit in that last chapter that I talked about that'll help you vet an insurance agent to make sure that they really know what they're talking about. Because in my years, and I'm sure I've mentioned this on other episodes of the podcast, in my years of networking with insurance agents, brokers, and otherwise, I've found that so many of them, I was actually having this conversation last week at lunch with an insurance agent colleague of mine of how few who are out here selling this stuff really understand what they're selling. Some of them don't even understand what insurance is and how it works. So I put some tools in this book to make sure that you know that you're getting a quality insurance agent, and you should always buy from an agent. Don't ever buy online, because there's nobody there to explain to you what coverage you're getting rid of that you don't even know that you're getting rid of it. And again, hi, this guy over here trying not to be the bearer of bad news for you when you do need to use this stuff. So that's all I have for this week. Be safe out there. Be well. We'll see you next week. And it'll be July. So happy almost July, everybody. Happy 250th birthday to this country.